Hey, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. This time previewing the West Virginia Mountaineers versus the Houston Cougars in Houston, Texas. A Thursday night contest, 7 p.m. on FS1. West Virginia coming in with a 4-1. 2-0 in conference record, and Houston coming in with a 2-3, 0-2 type record. So this is your preview for the game. I think this will release tonight here, late Wednesday. So if you're tuning into this early Thursday morning, so I bet you'll be as excited as I am about this Thursday evening matchup. And another one. We had 3 last year, so we at least had to have one for this year. So you'll probably be bubbling all over with excitement all day, just looking for work to get over. So I hope you enjoy this program in leading up into tonight's contest. So love to hear your thoughts. Make sure to comment on this video, please. I love that. Or you can tweet me on Twitter. If you like the content with this channel, go ahead and subscribe. And I have a lot of fun doing these videos for you, and I've really appreciated the comments so far, weeks in and weeks out. Seeing my video from a couple of days ago already getting over 1,500 views, so really appreciate y'all tuning in and enjoying this. It's really cathartic. It's like I feel like my West Virginia therapy to be able to come on here and do these videos. So as I like to do every single week with these preview matchups, I like to give you a little bit about the history. But given that this is the first ever matchup between the two programs, West Virginia and Houston, now both members of the Big 12 Conference, I wanted to do a little bit of research on the history of Houston football. Who the heck are these Cougars? They're not Pitt, they're not Virginia Tech. We don't know their decades-long history, so who are they? And let me give you a little bit of the background. So doing the research into this, Houston's football programs was essentially founded in 1945 as what we would recognize now as a club football team who wanted to play Rice, their arch rival. So we have it's funny that Houston's football program was basically founded because they wanted to play another school. So if we think we as West Virginia fans hate Pitt enough, I think Houston fans really hate Rice even more. So it's probably a big deal whenever they lost week 2 to J.T. Daniels and co. But so then for 17 years, Houston really tried to prove itself on the field to gain entrance in the more established Southwestern or Southeastern SEC conference, as we know it today. It wasn't until Hall of Fame coach Bill Yeoman joined the program in 1962 that Houston then developed a national identity, running the Veer offense and ascended to a top 20 power, or even better in a program in the nation at that point in time. So Houston finally gained entrance into the Southwest Conference in 1972 alongside Arkansas, Baylor, Texas, Texas A&M, Rice, SMU, TCU, and Texas Tech. So then Yeoman guided Houston to 4 Southwest Conference championships, which included Cotton Bowl wins over Maryland in 1976 and then Nebraska in 1979. So it was 7 years later, though, that this program was shrouded in controversy. 1986, Houston was alleged to have committed massive recruiting violations and benefits to players. So basically today's day and age of college football with the transfer portal and NIL. But Yeoman was forced to retire at that point in time in the late 80s. By 1988, Houston was charged with 250 violations, was placed on probation for 5 years, and received a 2-year bowl ban, and this is an interesting note, kicked off live television for the 1989 season. And why that's super significant is because that was when quarterback Andre Ware put together a Heisman Trophy winning campaign in 1989, passing for almost 4,700 yards and 46 touchdowns as Houston went 9-2, finishing the season 14th in the country, but no conference title or no bowl win to show for it. They parlayed that success in 1988 to in 1989, going 10-1. 1990, quarterback David Klingler finished 3rd in Heisman voting that year. So a lot of great success in the late 80s, early 90s. Then they get hit with the more is crap hit the fan really for Houston that marred them as a program. Similarly, I feel like in the same vein as SMU, more NCAA violations combined with consistent losing and really bad blood with members in their conference because of many different reasons. It sounds like running up the score or, players fighting with others on the field. It just seemed like the Houston just didn't get along. They were the renegades of the Southwest Conference. So whenever it fell apart, they were relegated to Conference USA. So many younger college football fans like myself know, Houston's really been a power player in the group of five for decades now, with long-standing lineage of offensive guru coaches like Art Briles, Kevin Sumlin, Tom Herman, and now Dana Holgorsen, as well as really good quarterbacks like Kevin Kolb, Case Keenum, and Greg Ward. So I think this history really segues well into, us talking about this year's Houston team. Houston's just always had, for close to 80 years, they've always been trying to push up to play with the big boys. They finally got there in the Southwest Conference, then they go back down to Conference USA, and now they get this massive opportunity in the Big 12, namely because of that late 2010 success with Ward, with Herman, and now with Dana Holgorsen coming there in 2019. But here's what I'll say. Now that they're finally here, they're not ready. They're simply put not ready. And I think it's namely due to recruiting. You look at the recruiting of their last 4 cycles since Dana Holgorsen has been the head coach, a lazy recruiter, as we know. As West Virginia fans. In 2020, they finished 79th in the country. 2021, 95th. This is all according to Rivals. 2022, 77th. Now, this past cycle, a little bit better, but still 51st in the country. And they just got 18 players. They did get 3 4-stars. So they didn't go ham in the transfer portal and spend a bunch of NIL money like Texas and Oklahoma did this past offseason. Hence why there's so much success this year for both these programs. But, they did bring over quarterback Donovan Smith, but who was beat out by Tyler Shuck and Baron Morton at Texas Tech. So it wasn't like, they were going out there and getting like a Bo Nix coming over from Auburn to Oregon, or Michael Penix coming from Indiana to Washington. They just really took a guy who didn't seem like was going to make it at the Power 5 level and said, hey, here's your keys to the starting quarterback position after Clayton Tune graduated and went to the NFL. And then a bunch of different cast-offs, as we really know from West Virginia, the best being Tony Mathis out of that group. So that's really why I knew coming into this season, and that's why I said it was ridiculous that West Virginia was ranked 14th out of 14 teams in the Big 12 preseason poll, is that Houston lacks the quality depth to compete in this league. And I think a lot of the teams, Central Florida probably most notably, is starting to experience that. They're starting to realize that this is a whole different ballgame. But then you look forward, and Dana Holgorsen's recruiting for 2024, the worst as it's been if it's ended today, if the cycle ended today, 94th. They only have 8 commits, 1 4-star for this next year's 2024 Houston recruiting class. And I think the fan base is really feeling that. I think they're completely dormant. I think all of the excitement that UCF, BYU, and even with Cincinnati losing Luke Fickell as their head coach, it's the complete opposite for Houston right now. They didn't sell out their Big 12 season opener against an in-state opponent in TCU. Tickets for this game on StubHub are going for $2 right now. So I just think that the Houston fan base is waiting for a change at head coach, and waiting for the athletic directors and up the lane of chain of command, waiting to green light the program to start a new chapter, fire Dana Holgorsen. But they didn't this past off season. I think given that the Big 12 was coming, and Dana Holgorsen oversaw the transition of West Virginia from the Big East into the Big 12. So rather than firing after last season, keeping him around for one more year, he did come off 2 years ago, I think, winning 11 games. So, he's boys with Tillman Fertitta. They brought him in here for this exact reason, to be the head coach into the Big 12. So they're seeing what he can do right now. But he's very much on the hot seat, and I don't think there's any questions about that especially starting off the way they have 2-3. So this is a big deal for Dana Holgorsen, the Houston program, so on and so forth. So I've done a lot of to talk about Houston so far, but I say all this is to give you the context to set the scene for this, actual preview of this game. And I got to say, on paper, this is probably the easiest opponent for West Virginia to go and crush. So that's my take, and I'm going to break it down for you. But this is a golden opportunity, I feel like, for West Virginia to get on the right track toward ascension of being a team that's worthy of being top 4 in the Big 12 conference standings. Right now, currently second. It's amazing to say that as we get here into this part of the schedule that I said preseason, would start to open up. So, wow. I know this game's on the road. It's a Thursday night, so not a Saturday, a more, unconventional week with the bye week last Saturday, but then you only have a few days to prepare. So you've had like 10 days off to prepare from this from Texas Tech. But, I think West Virginia is used to this as a program. Like I said, they played 3 Thursday night games last year. I think this was a perfectly timed bye week to heal up some guys after 2 physical contests against Texas Tech and TCU. And I have to imagine that West Virginia's players know the stakes of West Virginia beating its former head coach. I think both Dana Holgorsen and Neal Brown kind of played that down a little bit, but I have to imagine that this has been a game that's been looked at, maybe not circled as much as like the backyard brawl was per se, or even the Penn State game, I feel like, given so much history and proximity to West Virginia. But it's like, ooh, that was one of the games that you oohed whenever you saw the schedule. Would have probably hoped that this game would have been played in Morgantown, and man, I guarantee you Milan Puskar Stadium would have been sold out even if it was a Thursday night game to be there for this matchup. And I don't think, at least in probably the last 50 years, as a former West Virginia head football coach returned with an opposing. That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I didn't look that up. But so if you want to, I'm not going to break that down. I talked about that in my video from Monday. So go on my channel here, listen to why I say that I think that Houston and Dana Holgorsen needs to be punished by the Mountaineers. But I'll separate that. And I still think the last point, there's a lot to prove for this WVU offense, which Neal Brown says has its best football in front of them. So to preview the matchup, I think you got to read between the numbers with these two teams, looking at all the different stats. It's kind of, you can kind of get lost into the numbers with these and the context of how those lots of yards for Houston have not really turned into points per game, and then wins at the end of the day. So when I'll break this down in what you should be watching, what you should look for first when West Virginia has the ball, and then when Houston has the ball. So I'm not at all worried about this Houston pass defense. I think the TCU defense, even though when we broke that matchup down, was, I think, 9th worst in college football in pass defense, but those numbers were really inflated by that Week 1 contest against Shedeur Sanders in Colorado. But looking at the numbers for Houston, both in the rush defense and the pass defense, one of the bottom dwellers, especially in the Power 5, but all of FBS. 89th, allowing 242 yards per game through the air, and then 164 yards per game on the ground. And they're allowing 29 points per game on average. I mean, JT Daniels threw for 400 yards on them. So their pass defense is susceptible. TCU's Imani Bailey ran for over 100 yards on Houston. Their 2 running backs for Texas Tech, including Taj Brooks, ran for over 100 yards on Houston. They're just really susceptible both through the air and on the ground. I am concerned, though, about the potential absence of left tackle Wyatt Milam. I know we won't be seeing left guard Tomas Remak in this game due to the injury sustained from that jerk Demonic Williams from TCU, who eye gouged Wyatt Milam and also chop blocked Tomas Remak, and that's why he's still nursing that knee injury, and hopefully we can see him back for Oklahoma State next week. But Wyatt Milam's a game time decision If you look at the Pro Football Focus advanced analytics on him, and he has one of the best grades all season long of any tackle in the Big 12 Conference, and proving why he was a highly rated four-star recruit, has the potential prospects of the NFL. Like he along with Zach Frazier are, the two, I feel like, such important keys. I mean, Doug Nestor too, but I mean those two guys at the center position and left tackle, having two all conference caliber players at those positions. Just that's why West Virginia's, I feel like, doing so well and hanging in there and winning ball games. So, but because you're going to have Jaquay Hubbard at least either at right guard or move him over to left guard, and Brandon Yates vice versa at the guard. So I'm not necessarily as worried about the absence of Remack, but at Milam, what do you see there? Is it Nick Malone? Is it true freshman Johnny Williams? Do they completely shift around the offensive line, leaving Frazier in the middle, maybe flipping Nestor over to left tackle? I'm just a little bit concerned with that mix-up of the whole left side really being out of this game. So how do you put those pieces together up front? Houston's junior defensive lineman Nelson Caesar's a guy I'll be watching on that defensive line, and how much havoc does he wreak? 4.5 sacks on the season, 6 tackles for loss. He's really the only a player that you keep your eye on that Houston defense. So I think this could be a big game for C.J. Donaldson. Although I still will stick with what I said after the TCU game, is I think that it really depends on, here and in the short term, if Garrett Green can take pressure out of the box and complete some balls downfield. I think you're going to best believe that Neil Brown's not going to change up his game plan, having already beaten Texas Tech and TCU. They're going to continue to want to run the ball against even a stacked box of 7 to 8-man boxes, wear Houston down, work clock. Houston knows this. If you hear comments from Holgorsen this past week, he really credited C.J. Donaldson. Everybody in this conference knows about C4. So can he still run against that? Can this offensive line open up holes? So what do those potential absences and shuffling the line do to this run game? That's yet to be seen. We'll see in this contest. Will Cole Taylor make more of an impact than he did against TCU? We didn't really see him until about the second half, and he's this team's leader in receptions. Will Jalen Anderson be back in his role at the number 2 running back position? And is Garrett Green picking up as if he was done with the Duquesne game and he's walking into the backyard brawl after he had so much success? Maybe his foot being off his feet for a few extra days has helped him throwing the ball. I've been seeing that on Twitter. I guess he's throwing the ball better than he did even in fall camp. And then which wide receivers are going to step up? Who's going to finally get separation? And can Garrett Green hit successfully down the field? Because I think that is... That's college football, I feel like, in 2023, is that the pass then opens up the run, especially in this new age RPO game, is these teams have to defenses, you got to prove that you can throw on them before they're going to not stack the box against your offensive line. And so far, West Virginia's had, I think, really flashes of success with that. I can think of just like one drive or two drive with Marchiol from the Texas Tech game. I can think of a couple of series in the third quarter against TCU with Green at quarterback. Pitt was just a complete anomaly, circling the wagons in that game. So this is the opportunity, I feel like, for West Virginia's defense, or for West Virginia's offense, where I love the numbers. Where I really love the numbers for West Virginia is Houston's porous red zone defense. Teams are 82% successful against Houston in the red zone, 14 for 17, and opponents have scored touchdowns, not field goals, on 13 of those 14 conversions. So if West Virginia can get inside Houston's 20, you can pretty much bank on that they're going to score some sort of points. So wow, that's awesome. Now, when Houston has the ball, Houston's a real funny one, because you look at quarterback Donovan Smith's numbers and you're like, how in the world is Houston's offense only scoring 27 points per game on average, and why the heck are they 2-3? But Houston's offense gets stuck in neutral a lot. They get down double digits and they implode. I talked about that in last week's game preview against TCU, what they were able to do out of the third quarter against Houston. It seems like they churned up so much clock kept control of the ball throughout the third quarter. Houston had like a couple of 3-and-outs, and boom, TCU's up 2 scores, and they're singing the fight song before the fourth quarter is even over. So looking at their game last week against Texas Tech was a weird one. There was a lot of special teams miscues by Houston in that one that Texas Tech was able to capitalize on a high-scoring affair that, if you watched it in person, was just a mess. Just not one of those games that you necessarily. Great offense to a certain extent, but just bad aligned, poorly executed football that I just think like a Georgia or a Penn State or Texas or name another top 5 team against the Houston or Oregon or Washington would just absolutely just destroy both of those teams because of just how poorly fundamental they were. But 10 days ago against Texas, 42-28, 9:22 left in the third quarter. Houston drives all the way down to the Texas Tech 28. Tony Mathis is stopped on a 4th and 1. Their next offensive series, you're stuck in your own end zone. 2 holding penalties cost you from crossing your own 20. They punt, 3-and-out next series. Tech scores another touchdown, and the game's basically over. So, next series, another holding penalty costs you 10 yards, back inside your own 20, punt, and you get beat by 3 scores. So, very stereotypical, undisciplined, undetailed, win only one kind of way type of Houston team in that game at Jones AT&T Stadium. And Houston just really doesn't have the kind of talent to win this year. There was a kickoff, return and punt return for touchdowns by Texas Tech in that game. And sticking with special teams, Houston's kicker Jack Martin is just 4 of 8 on field goal attempts this year. So they're still trying to figure that position out. But this offense runs through Smith. He's going to sling the ball all over the field, completing 65% of his passes, averaging 270 pass yards per game. But again, don't be tantalized too much by the statistics. A 9-3 touchdown to interception ratio. He gets the ball out fast, but he tends to hold on to the ball too long. 13 sacks already taken on the year. And he's also Houston's leader in rush attempts, 55 for 248 yards, but the 85 yards in sacks, he's just down to 32 yards per game on the ground. So a lot like Shuck, you can see the system that he came from in Texas Tech while they're trying to use him similarly at Houston to run everything through him. Surprisingly, Tony Mathis isn't Houston's leading rusher, but I bet he will be heavily involved given how much familiarity, let's put it that way, that he has with West Virginia, and he added motivation to beat his former team. We'll see. But scat-back freshman running back Parker Jenkins is leading the way for Texas Tech with the most yards. Last week he had 13 carries for 71 yards, 218 total on the season. So they're trying to work in Mathis, another back, and Jenkins into this attack, but still Smith is going to do most of the damage himself at quarterback. Now, there are 3 wide receivers on the roster with 24 or more receptions on the season. So that's impressive when you compare it to Cole Taylor, who's WVU's leader with just 13. So then you have Hudson Clement at 10. So 3 wide receivers on the roster have 24 or more catches. Led by a familiar player, wide receiver Sam Brown, former Mountaineer who just stayed 1 season, then hit the transfer portal, and strangely, being a Neil Brown recruit later in his tenure, not early in his tenure, you wondered what was the connection, given that I think he came from Florida. And Brown, I remember hearing about this through social media, was just a problem child. Brown said that, and this was an interesting little nugget, that he said he probably didn't handle Sam Brown really well, and he didn't really like the wide receiver room that he was a part of at the time. So, interesting note. I feel like that maybe says some things about some former wide receivers at WVU. But anyway, Sam Brown, 518 yards on 34 receptions with a touchdown. Those yards are good for 22nd in the country. Excuse me. And then you have Joseph Manjek, the fourth, 25 catches, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Matthew Golden, 24 catches, 261 yards, and four touchdowns, the team leader. So it's going to run through Brown, and then those are kind of the compliments to him. I have no qualms or no tales of caution at all for Beanie Bishop. I love Beanie Bishop in his game. What he's done so far this year, I think he's going to lock down Sam Brown well. I think he's going to frustrate him. I think he's proved it against better receivers so far this season. So it's just that Brown is Bishop's next victim. So I can't wait to watch how that they go at each other. That's one of the games within the games that I feel like that we can watch. And then what does Malachi Ruffin do? He was excellent in that TCU game in man coverage. And then do we see Jacoby Spells be used more as we get toward the second half of the season? With Bishop obviously graduating after this year, but he's been awesome. Now talking about the WVU defense, when Houston has the ball, I'm really curious to see how this WVU defense responds without Trey Lathan at linebacker. True freshman Ben Cutter is going to get the start, but I don't know necessarily if start means anything more than just the first play of the game. I still think we're going to see a lot of Jai Favaris. I think Hershey McLaurin, if he's not going to get on the field at safety, could potentially roll into that linebacker position, and those three players share Lathan's role. It will be, he'll be desperately missed, I feel like, given the, up-and-coming riser, soarer, it seemed like, as a tackler for this team and the way he was able to close on the ball this year. I was really, really impressed with what Lathan's done so far in the season. But, if Aubrey Burks is also questionable, we remember him getting taken off on a cart at the in the third quarter, I think it was, of the TCU game. So I would imagine, I have the feeling that Neil Brown's going to keep him out of this one, trying to get him, healthy for the back half of the season, get him back to Morgantown next week against Oklahoma where he can play on a familiar field. So the safeties, Anthony Wilson, Marcus Floyd, do we see Hershey McLaurin? Do you get Lance Dixon in at safety to then move McLaurin up into the linebacker position? Do you switch that? I think you got to somehow get McLaurin on the field, so I think he would go into that safety position with Dixon backing him up, but then does Dixon potentially rotate in with Cutter? We'll see. Track that, and I love the statistics that Keenan Cummings and Rivals puts out after the game of snap percentages so that we can see who gets to play through most of the games and situationally. But what does the middle of the field look like? If they're going to go on quick slant patterns and out routes and get the ball out quickly out of Donovan Smith's hands, he only completes, I think it's 7 yards per completion on average. So these linebackers as well as these defensive backs are going to be called upon to make tackles in space, on crossing routes. So what kind of scheme does Jordan Leslie and co deploy? I love the way that they played against TCU in the second half. How much of a rush does West Virginia get, or is it dependent upon situations? How much does Houston decide to run the ball? Are the defensive linemen going to get up to block balls down on first and second downs? I thought Jordan Jefferson last year was excellent at that, so I think he's taught Mike Lockhart a thing or two at that position. Sean Martin obviously blocking the field goal last week. I know it's a different situation, but it's not to say that these defensive linemen can't get up. So can they block down some balls if it's repetitive, quick passing, and Houston can't run the ball? So that kind of breaks it down on both offense and defense for the Mountaineers. So I'll give you my 3 keys to victory, which I do every single week. I think you got to do what you want to do offensively, simply put. So if this means running the ball 60 times, this line's got to open up holes. The running back's got to hit them, not dance around in the backfield, hit the holes when they open up, but they got to open up. That's the thing, and that's the criticism that I could not believe that fans were saying on Twitter about C.J. Donaldson in that TCU game. There wasn't anywhere for him to run. So the longest run between C.J. Donaldson, Justin Johnson, and Jalen Anderson so far this year is just 17 yards. So is it Jaheim White who's going to be continued to be counted upon as like the change of pace kind of home run hitter out of this running back group? or are you just going to consistently get 5, in between to get you first downs and churn and wear Houston down that way? Or if this means throwing the ball 60 times. Receivers and tight ends need to create separation. I think Brown's got to call the right plays at the right times, and then can this left side of the line block, especially if Milam doesn't play. But I think I'll just put it this way. And if there's anything that you tune into for this video, take away from this. I think this is a huge red flag if this isn't a breakout kind of game for West Virginia's offense. If this is a lot more of the same, in which it just looks like West Virginia is either going 90 or they're going 10 and can't develop any sort of offensive continuity, I think that puts a cap or a ceiling on what this season can potentially be. As I'm looking down at the rest of the schedule, and I really do, I think this and probably Cincinnati are West Virginia's best 2 shots at a blowout, at playing the kind of game that they need to prove that they are, serious about potentially contending for a conference title. And with the schedule set up the way it is, all roads lead through Norman, so 11-11 down in the state of Oklahoma just is looking bigger and bigger on paper down the line. So what I mean to say is this West Virginia offense needs to dictate the terms. They need to be efficient. They need to be effective. And again, whether it's run, whether it's pass, I don't care. Just start to look like a functioning kind of offense, not like your Iowa or not like your Pitt out there. Go out there, achieve first downs, put up points on the board, especially when you get in the red zone, because this Houston defense is yours for the taking. Now, defensively, number 2, my 3 keys to victory, no big plays. And West Virginia's done a great job about this since the Penn State game. Houston has proved throughout its games against Texas Tech and TCU in conference, and even Rice and even UTSA week 1. If you stay with them in a boxing match going shot for shot, eventually they're going to lose field position, they're going to penalize themselves, they're going to turn the ball over, they're going to have a special teams miscue. It's typical, chug a Red Bull, throw your headset kind of game, I feel like, for Dana Holgorsen and his defense. So they can be outlasted, especially easier than TCU in Texas Tech. It's going to be a much quieter atmosphere than in Fort Worth. So take the crowd out of the game by not giving up a big play early, giving them confidence like Penn State's quarterback was able to do on the first offensive series for the Nittany Lions, and got the crowd sparked up and throughout all 4 quarters. So that's Dana's calling card, is going for big play shots. We saw it for 8 seasons. Is he's not afraid to throw the ball all over the field and take shots. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, where you're playing. That's the ball. That's the kind of game that he wants to play. So he's going to try and do this early. I said this about Texas Tech, but we didn't see it, I feel like, because of the weather. Houston, not going to be a factor. They're going to do that. So cannot give up any big chunk plays, especially that go for scores. And I think this, my third point, really parlays with my first one about the offense, is I think this is a prove-it game that West Virginia can put a team away rather than them hanging around in the fourth quarter. Houston is not good, period. The only element of this game that's intriguing, I feel like, is the Holgorsen-West Virginia connection. So if this was, name any other, bottom-feeding Pac-12, ACC, this isn't much different, I feel like, than Marshall. I feel like Marshall could probably beat this Houston team. So replace the colors, replace the logo and the location, and without the Holgorsen-WVU connection, who's watching this game? So West Virginia has not beaten a Big 12 opponent by at least 2 touchdowns, as the fans on Twitter like to say, since November 14th of 2020, when West Virginia beat TCU 24-6. So snuff out their offense, just like you did against TCU in the second half. Dictate the terms offensively and pound them. Don't get penalized, and they're one of the best teams in the country so far this season in fewest penalties and penalty yardage. And don't have any special teams miscues, and they've gotten so much better over that. If you compare 2022 to 2023 in, especially punt return yardage, kickoff coverage, field position, you name it, they're stealing. I think Jed Drenning put out this stat during the bye week, is they're stealing somewhere in the ballpark of about 40 yards from their team a year ago. And that 40 yards can make or break a team. Points are valuable in this league. So this is the easiest win, I feel like, left on the schedule. I don't care what the spread says at 2.5, 3 points. I don't care that you're playing on the road versus at home. So if you're West Virginia, show you have cojones. Show you can be a ranked team. I think you're right now on the cusp. If you make a statement in this contest and can put a team away by 2 scores or more, and I can't believe that's just asking such an insurmountable or topic of conversation, or saying something so like hot take risque that like West Virginia should be able to beat Houston by at least 2 touchdowns. They should. So early on in the preseason, when I gave my preseason predictions, I said this game was going to be 38-24. I thought that that the West Virginia offense would be better than it is so far, but I didn't think the defense was going to be this good. So if I could stick with a new type of prediction, I think this could be in the ballpark of like 31 to 35-17. I think it can be that dominant of a performance. And West Virginia has 4 touchdowns, a field goal or 2, or maybe 5 touchdowns, and they hold Houston to just 17 points. If TCU could hold them to 13, why can't West Virginia hold them to 17? Is that so much to ask for with an extra a few days to prepare for this contest? So that's really the way I feel. Is I think that West Virginia has a golden opportunity here. If they win it close, I mean, whatever, a win's a win's a win, and that's kind of the theme for the whole season. You're not going to judge based on quality this year. You're going to judge based on quantity at the end of the day. But I do think that this opportunity is just right for the taking for West Virginia to go down there and make a statement against a crowd that's not going to, is a fraction of the size of what you played in Happy Valley. So go out there and punish them. Take it to them. And like I said in my video the other day, Holgorsen has to pay his pound of flesh for some of the things that he did and some of the things that he said, and the consequences of those actions late in 2018, and then that affected then 2019 and down the road. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to see your comments come through here on YouTube. Again, tweet me, Carson_Fox27 on Twitter. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll be tuning in tomorrow night, Thursday, 7 p.m. kickoff on FS1, and I'll come back and recap it for you, probably Friday evening after I get home from work. So I'm looking forward to it. I think this is an awesome moment that can that can really springboard West Virginia into the second half of the season. And one more win closer to Kirk Herbstreit having to give Pat McAfee anything he wants by West Virginia to getting over the 6-win hump. So that'll be fun. So let's go Mountaineers, hail West Virginia, and I'll talk to you on Friday.